I love hearing Sally's voice again. I first heard these words at her memorial. So if you recall, she said that she was hoping that these words that she spoke at her mother's memorial would be spoken at hers. They were by her. They played this video and she spoke those, she fulfilled her own desire, as it were, at her. But she also talked about the nurse log, and I consider myself one of the little trees growing out of her nurse log. So she means a great deal to me, and she transformed the way I see God and the way that I see God's relationship to the world. So we're doing things a little differently because it's the season of creation and we face a crisis. But why, I ask, in the name of God, should we care about the environment? Why should the fight against climate change be our fight? And the answer to this question comes down to how do we understand God and how we understand God and God's relationship to the world. Sally gave me a whole new answer to this question than what I had before I met her. She argues that we all develop models of God by which we understand the divine. And some models are better, more helpful, perhaps, than others. She was also pretty clear that God, in God's self, exists beyond all words, yet it's only through words that we come to experience the divine. So one model of God and God's relationship with the world that is very popular in Christian circles is a model that has God as a manager or owner, if you will, and that God has made us stewards. Of course, we all know about stewardship. It's a common part of Christian lingo. We talk about stewardship regularly. Basically, what it means is we are asked to take care of something that belongs to somebody else for that other person. That's the basic idea of stewardship. And when this comes to the environment, what it means is that God has entrusted us the environment, and it's our responsibility to look after it. And this model has been pretty effective in encouraging Christians towards faithful action. However, it does have its problems, its limitations. Seeing God in radically different terms than creation can separate God from creation, so that God and creation are on totally different sides of the configuration. And it can in turn separate us from creation, so we don't see our connection to creation. It is something, nature, that's out there that's not really a part of us. Nevertheless, it's a powerful model. For example, if God is an artist and all of nature is God's artwork, there are obvious implications for action and behavior. Now, if you create a beautiful painting or a wonderful piece of ceramic, and I come along and trash it, break it under my feet, I'm not physically attacking you, but I am still attacking you. That's an act of violence against you as the artist. If I desecrate your artwork, I'm in a sense desecrating you. It's a direct act of violence. And so when we desecrate nature, we're indirectly desecrating God because nature is God's artwork. And for those who love God, this can be an powerful incentive to preserve nature, to fight against climate change. Yet, as I've said, the stewardship model, for all its strengths, can tend to separate us from nature and from creation. God from creation and us from creation. And so Sally suggests another model, which she mentioned in passing. And this model has immediate and I think quite powerful implications for how we feel and how we act towards the environment. Sometimes I think we're more interested in the thoughts and getting our ideology, but the feelings are important too. If we don't feel it, if it's not important to us in that intensity level, there's chances are that we're not going to do a whole lot. And I think Sally's model connects us, those who love God, to our feeling level too, as well as our minds. Sally argues, as she said quite beautifully, I think in the little clip, that God is everywhere, God is in everything, everything is in God, even while God is beyond everything. And from this, Sally argues that we can see God, the world, as God's body. Now, before we get offended at this sort of talk, Sally would, I think, be quick to remind us that all talk about God is metaphoric. The actual reality of God is not something we have access to. So words can never capture the fullness of divine reality, even though they're pretty much all we've got. So if we use our imagination and imagine that the world is God's body, nature is God's body, that God is found in the beauty of the morning dew and in the majesty of a thunderstorm, God is in the world and God yet remains beyond the world. And this is a powerful model of that would engage us in the fight towards environmental fight against climate change. The stewardship model, because of its nature, inclines us towards acts of faithful service. A steward needs to be faithful to the owner who relegated the responsibility. And that's powerful. But the world as God's body motivates us towards protecting the environment as an act of worship, not mere service. If God is in the world, then if we desecrate the world, we're desecrating God. And if we help heal the world, we're helping to heal God. Now, before again, we get offended at the idea of healing, harming, helping, hindering God, surely we cannot do these things. Surely we cannot harm God, we might think. Yet, at the center of our religion is the crucifixion. The central moment of our collective history with God is an act of brutality where the Son of God is destroyed, is harmed. So yes, we can harm God. And unfortunately, I would suggest that we do it all the time. We do it when we disrespect strangers, and more importantly, for today's purpose, we do it when we don't take care of the environment. We're insulting God, we're harming God, we're diminishing God. And for those who love God, that's a pretty powerful emotional reason to get into the environmental fight. So regardless of whether you embrace the stewardship model or the world as God's body model, or perhaps some other model, this season of creation is a time for us to deeply reflect upon what impact our lives as people of faith has upon the natural world. Where do you see God in the natural world? What do you think God is calling us to do as a community, as faithful stewards, or as lovers of God's body? What is God calling us to do? These are the questions that I think we need to spend some time on, or really for the rest of our lives, but certainly in the next month and during this time of the season of creation.